What happens when a late-night host pushes too far and a royal guest reaches his breaking point? Tonight we're diving into one of the most explosive celebrity interviews ever recorded, where Prince Harry's appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live turned from friendly banter into an all-out verbal warfare that left the studio audience in stunned silence. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused Harry to lose his cool. Now let's get into what really went down that night. The evening started like any other taping of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The studio was packed with an enthusiastic audience, cameras were rolling, and Jimmy Kimmel was in his element, cracking jokes during his monologue. The show had been promoting Prince Harry's appearance for weeks, promising viewers an intimate conversation about his new charitable initiatives and his life in California. What nobody expected was the powder keg that was about to explode right there on national television. Prince Harry walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, flashing that signature royal smile as he waved to the crowd. He looked relaxed in a tailored navy suit, his trademark ginger hair perfectly styled. Jimmy greeted him with the usual host enthusiasm, shaking his hand firmly before they both settled into their chairs. The first few minutes played out exactly as everyone expected: light-hearted conversation about Harry's adjustment to American life, his love for California weather, and some gentle ribbing about his British accent. Jimmy started with his typical softball questions, asking about Harry's favorite American foods and whether he missed traditional British cuisine. Harry laughed easily, sharing stories about his first encounter with In-N-Out Burger and how Meghan had to teach him the proper way to order. The audience was eating it up, laughing at all the right moments, as the two men seemed to genuinely enjoy each other's company. Jimmy even joked about Harry's security detail, wondering if they had to approve his jokes beforehand. But then something shifted in Jimmy's demeanor. Perhaps it was the comedian in him sensing an opportunity. Or maybe he had planned this line of questioning all along. Whatever the reason, Jimmy's tone became more pointed as he leaned forward in his chair, his famous smile taking on a sharper edge. "You know, Harry, I have to ask," Jimmy said, his voice carrying that familiar late-night host cadence, but with an underlying tension that made the audience lean forward. "A lot of people are wondering about your relationship with your family back home. I mean, you've been pretty vocal about your issues with the royal institution, but some folks are saying you're airing dirty laundry for profit. What do you say to those critics?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Harry's smile faltered slightly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He shifted in his chair, his hands clasping together as he considered his response. The studio audience, sensing the change in atmosphere, fell completely silent. "Well, Jimmy," Harry began, his voice measured but with a hint of steel underneath, "I think those people don't understand the full picture. Everything I've shared has been about healing, about breaking cycles of pain that have affected my family for generations. It's not about profit, it's about truth." Jimmy nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with that answer. Right, I get that. But come on, Harry, you have to admit that some of your revelations have been pretty damaging to your family's reputation. I mean, the racism allegations, the claims about lack of support during Meghan's mental health struggles, the whole thing with your brother William. Don't you think there might have been a more private way to handle these issues? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Harry's posture straightened, his shoulders squaring as his media training kicked in, but there was something in his eyes that suggested his patience was beginning to wear thin. The audience could feel it too, that electric tension that comes right before a storm breaks. "Jimmy, with all due respect," Harry said, his British accent becoming more pronounced as it always did when he was stressed, "you're asking me to stay silent about my own experiences. You're asking me to protect an institution that didn't protect my wife, that didn't protect my mother. How is that fair?" Jimmy's eyebrows raised slightly and he leaned back in his chair with that look comedians get when they sense they've hit a nerve. "Hey, I'm not asking you to stay silent about anything, Harry. I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, there's a difference between sharing your truth and settling scores on international television. I mean, your grandmother just passed away. Your father is dealing with his own health issues. And you're still out here dropping bombshells in interviews. Some people might call that timing questionable. The words landed like a physical blow. Harry's face went completely still, his green eyes flashing with something that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. The cameras caught everything, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his breathing became more controlled, the dangerous quiet that settled over him like armor. Questionable timing, Harry repeated, his voice so low that the audience had to strain to hear him. Are you seriously suggesting that I should have stayed quiet about my family's treatment of my wife because of timing? That I should have let the lies and the manipulation continue because it might be inconvenient for them? Jimmy realized he might have pushed too hard, but he was in too deep to back down now. Look, Harry, I'm not trying to attack you here. I'm just asking the questions that a lot of people want answered. Your family can't exactly defend themselves publicly the way you can, right? They have protocols, traditions, ways of doing things that go back centuries. Meanwhile, you're out here giving tell-all interviews and writing books. It's not exactly a fair fight. That was the moment everything changed. Harry's careful composure cracked, and for the first time since sitting down, the real man underneath the media-trained exterior broke through. His voice, when he spoke, carried years of suppressed anger and pain. Fair fight? Harry's voice rose, causing several audience members to gasp audibly. You want to talk about fair fights, Jimmy? Let me tell you about fair fights. Is it fair when palace staff brief against my wife to protect my brother? Is it fair when they refuse to protect her from racist attacks in the media, but will move heaven and earth to kill a story about William's alleged affair? Is it fair when they tell me my wife's mental health struggles aren't their problem, but then spend millions on public relations to make themselves look good? The studio fell into complete silence. Jimmy's face had gone pale, clearly realizing that he had unleashed something he couldn't control. The producers in the control room were frantically signaling, but there was no stopping what was happening on stage. Harry was leaning forward now, his voice gaining strength and fury with each word. You sit there in your comfortable chair, making jokes about my family's dysfunction like it's entertainment, but you have no idea what it's like to watch the woman you love suffer while the people who are supposed to protect her actively work against her. You have no idea what it's like to realize that your own family will sacrifice your happiness, your wife's mental health, even your children's well-being to protect an image. Jimmy tried to interject, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. Harry, I think maybe we should take a step back here. I didn't mean to upset you. I was just trying to have an honest conversation about a situation that a lot of people are curious about. But Harry was beyond diplomatic responses now. The dam had burst, and years of carefully controlled royal restraint were flooding out in a torrent of raw emotion that had the audience sitting in stunned silence. Honest conversation? Harry's voice cracked with bitter laughter that sent chills through the studio. You want honest? Let me give you honest, Jimmy. You want to know why I left? It wasn't just about the racism, though that was horrific enough. It wasn't just about the lack of support, though watching my wife contemplate suicide while my family worried more about their image than her life will haunt me forever. It was about realizing that I was never anything more than a spare part. To them, useful when they needed good publicity, disposable when I became inconvenient. The cameras captured every raw emotion crossing Harry's face, the pain and anger that had been building for years finally breaking free. Jimmy sat frozen, his usual quick wit completely failing him, as he watched one of the most famous men in the world completely unravel on his stage. Harry, maybe we should, Jimmy started, but Harry cut him off with a sharp gesture. No, you wanted this conversation, so let's have it. You want to talk about my family not being able to defend themselves? They've been defending themselves my entire life, Jimmy. Every leaked story, every anonymous palace source, every carefully planted piece in the British tabloids, that's them defending themselves. The difference is they've been doing it in the shadows, using people like me as human shields while they stayed above the fray looking dignified. The audience was completely transfixed. Some people had their phones out recording despite studio policies, sensing they were witnessing something historic. The energy in the room was electric with tension, like watching a car crash in slow motion. Harry's voice grew stronger, more passionate with each revelation. You know what's really rich about your questions, Jimmy? You're sitting here acting like I'm the one who broke some sacred trust, like I'm the one who violated family loyalty. But where was that loyalty when I was 12 years old, walking behind my mother's coffin while the world watched? Where was that family protection when they forced two grieving children to perform their grief for public consumption? Jimmy's face had gone ashen. He glanced desperately toward his producers, but they were just as captivated by the train wreck unfolding before them. Harry, I think maybe we're getting a little too heavy here. Maybe we should talk about something else, your charity work perhaps? Too heavy? Harry laughed again, but there was no humor in it. You're the one who opened this door, Jimmy. You're the one who wanted to psychoanalyze my family relationships on national television. So let's analyze, shall we? Let's talk about how they used my mother's death as a teaching moment about duty and service, while privately they were relieved she couldn't cause them any more embarrassment. Let's talk about how they turned my grief into a public relations opportunity. The studio was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Several audience members looked genuinely uncomfortable, shifting in their seats as they witnessed this unprecedented breakdown of royal composure. Jimmy kept trying to regain control of the interview, but Harry was beyond anyone's control now. "And you want to know about William?" Harry continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than his shouting had. "My brother, who I loved more than anyone in the world, he chose them over me, Jimmy. When push came to shove, when I needed him most, he chose the institution that killed our mother over the brother who had stood by him through everything." Jimmy finally found his voice, though it came out shakier than usual. "Harry, I can see you're upset, and I understand why these topics are painful. But don't you think you might be being a little unfair to William? I mean, he's in a difficult position too, right? He's got responsibilities, expectations." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Harry's eyes flashed with fury as he turned to face Jimmy directly, his entire body language screaming confrontation. "Unfair to William? Are you kidding me right now? Do you have any idea what it's like to have your brother choose protocol over your life? To have him tell you that your wife should just accept racist abuse because that's how things are done?" The host was visibly sweating now, clearly regretting every decision that had led to this moment. "I'm sure he didn't mean it that way, Harry. Maybe there was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Harry's voice rose again, causing several audience members to jump. "There was no misunderstanding when he physically grabbed me during an argument about Meghan. There was no misunderstanding when he told me I was being overdramatic about death threats against my wife. There was no misunderstanding when he said I should be grateful the family even accepted her." The gasps from the audience were audible. Now, people were looking at each other in shock, unable to believe what they were hearing. This was going far beyond anything Harry had ever revealed before, even in his most candid interviews. Jimmy tried one more time to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Look, Harry, I can see this is really affecting you. Family relationships are complicated, especially when you're in the public eye. Maybe we should take a commercial break, give you a chance to collect yourself." But Harry was having none of it. He stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward as he began pacing the small space in front of Jimmy's desk. "Collect myself? You think I need to collect myself? I've been collecting myself for 30 years, Jimmy. I've been smiling and waving and playing the part of the happy prince while my family systematically destroyed everything I cared about." The cameras followed his every movement as he gestured wildly, years of royal training completely abandoned. You want to know why I really left? It wasn't just about Meghan, though watching them try to break her was horrific. It was about realizing that they would sacrifice anyone, including their own children, to protect their precious reputation. It was about understanding that to them, I was never Harry. I was never a person with feelings and needs and dreams. I was just an insurance policy, a backup plan in case something happened to the heir. Jimmy was completely out of his depth now, watching helplessly as one of the most explosive celebrity meltdowns in television history unfolded on his stage. Harry, please, maybe you should sit down. You're getting really worked up here. Worked up? Harry spun to face him, his face flushed with anger and pain. You have no idea what worked up looks like, Jimmy. Worked up is finding out your family has been briefing against your wife while she's pregnant. Worked up is discovering that they're more concerned about a tiara controversy than the fact that your wife is having suicidal thoughts. Worked up is realizing that the people who raised you see you as nothing more than a public relations problem to be managed. The studio fell into complete silence again, the weight of Harry's words settling over everyone like a heavy blanket. Even the crew members had stopped what they were doing, transfixed by the raw emotion pouring out of the prince. Harry continued, his voice now carrying a deep sadness alongside the anger. And the worst part, Jimmy, the absolute worst part, is that I still love them. Despite everything they've done, despite how they've treated me and my family, I still love my father and my brother. And that makes it hurt so much more, because they've chosen duty over love, tradition over family, image over truth. They've chosen everything except me. Jimmy sat there speechless, finally understanding that he had unleashed something far bigger than he could handle. The interview had gone completely off the rails, and there was no bringing it back. The audience was sitting in stunned silence, witnessing what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about television moments in history. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the sound of Harry's heavy breathing as he stood there, chest heaving with the weight of everything he had just unleashed. Jimmy looked like a man who had just witnessed a natural disaster, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly as he gripped his desk. Finally, Jimmy cleared his throat and made one last desperate attempt to salvage the interview. Harry, I want you to know that I never intended for this conversation to go in this direction. I was just trying to ask the questions that people want answered. But I can see that I've touched on some really painful subjects for you. Harry stopped pacing and turned to look at Jimmy with an expression that was somehow both exhausted and furious. Painful subjects? Jimmy, these aren't just painful subjects for me. These are my life. This is my reality. You and everyone else treat my family's dysfunction like it's some kind of entertainment, some royal soap opera for public consumption. But these are real people we're talking about, real relationships that have been destroyed. The host nodded earnestly, clearly trying to show empathy, but his next words revealed just how little he understood the gravity of what was happening. Of course, and I think our audience really appreciates your honesty tonight. It takes courage to be this open about family issues, especially when you're in your position. That was the final straw. Harry's face went completely still, his eyes narrowing as he stared at Jimmy with an intensity that made the temperature in the room seem to drop another 10 degrees. Courage? You think this is about courage, Jimmy? You think I'm here being brave by sharing my trauma for your audience's entertainment? Jimmy realized immediately that he had said the wrong thing, but the damage was already done. No, Harry, that's not what I meant at all. I just meant that it's important for people to see that even royals have real problems, real struggles. Even royals? Harry's voice was dangerously quiet now, the kind of quiet that comes right before an explosion. Even royals have real problems. Do you hear yourself right now? You're sitting there talking about my family's destruction, my wife's mental health crisis, my mother's death, like it's some kind of learning experience for your viewers. The audience was holding its collective breath, sensing that something catastrophic was about to happen. Jimmy tried to backtrack, his media training finally kicking in, but it was far too late. "Harry, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Here. I have nothing but respect for what you've been through." "Respect?" Harry laughed, but it was a sound completely devoid of humor, a bitter bark that made several people in the audience visibly flinch. "You have respect for what I've been through? Then why are you treating it like a punchline? Why are you sitting there with that smug expression, acting like you've just gotten some exclusive scoop instead of witnessing a man's breakdown?" Jimmy's face flushed red as he realized how callous he must have appeared. "That's not fair, Harry. I wasn't being smug. I was trying to be supportive." "Supportive?" Harry's voice rose again, echoing through the stunned studio. "You want to be supportive? Then stop treating my pain like content for your show. Stop acting like my family's problems are your material. Stop pretending that you care about my well-being when what you really care about is your ratings." The accusations hung in the air like smoke, and Jimmy finally seemed to understand the full scope of what he had done. He had pushed a grieving, traumatized man to his breaking point on national television, all in the name of entertainment. "Harry, I'm sorry. I never intended for this to happen. Maybe we should just end the interview here." But Harry wasn't done. Years of media manipulation, of being treated like a commodity rather than a human being, came pouring out in a torrent of rage that was both terrifying and heartbreaking to witness. "End the interview? Now you want to end it? After you've gotten what you wanted? After you've pushed me to expose my deepest wounds for your audience's consumption?" He began pacing again, his movements sharp and agitated as he spoke. "This is exactly what they all do, Jimmy. The press, the palace, people like you. You push and push and push until you get the reaction you want, until you get the story that will make headlines, and then when it gets too real, when it gets too uncomfortable, suddenly you want to pull back and pretend you care about the person you just destroyed." Jimmy looked genuinely stricken now, finally understanding the full weight of what he had done. "Harry, please. I never wanted to destroy anyone. I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Harry stopped dead in his tracks, turning to face Jimmy with an expression of pure incredulity. "Your job is to destroy people? Your job is to push traumatized individuals until they break down on camera? That's the job you signed up for?" The studio was so quiet that the hum of the cameras seemed deafening. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but Harry wasn't finished with him yet. "Let me tell you something about jobs, Jimmy. My job was supposed to be serving my country, helping people, making a difference in the world. But instead, my job became being a trained SEAL, performing for the cameras while my family systematically destroyed everything I cared about. My job became smiling while they fed me to the wolves, staying silent while they sacrificed my happiness for their image." His voice broke slightly on the last words, revealing the deep pain underneath all, the anger. "And now here I am, doing it again. Here I am, performing my trauma for an audience, letting someone else profit from my pain. I swore I would never do this again, and yet here I am." Jimmy looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "Harry, I'm truly sorry. If I could take back this whole conversation, I would." Harry stared at him for a long moment, his chest still heaving with emotion. "You're sorry? You're sorry that you got caught up in the moment and forgot that I'm a human being? You're sorry that you treated my family's dysfunction like a game show? Or are you just sorry that it's gotten uncomfortable for you?" Before Jimmy could answer, Harry shook his head and took a step back from the desk. "You know what, Jimmy? I'm done. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with this conversation. And I'm done pretending that any of this is normal or acceptable." He began removing his microphone with shaking hands, his voice carrying a finality that made everyone in the studio realize they were witnessing something unprecedented. "I came here tonight thinking I could have a civilized conversation about my work, about the things that matter to me. Instead, you turned it into a circus, just like everyone else always does." The microphone pack hit the floor with a small thud that seemed to echo through the silent studio. Harry straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and profound sadness. To everyone watching this, I want you to understand something. This is what happens when you treat people like entertainment instead of human beings. This is what happens when you prioritize ratings over basic human decency. And this is exactly why I left my old life behind, because I refuse to be anyone's performing monkey ever again. He turned back to Jimmy one last time, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper again. I hope you got what you wanted tonight, Jimmy. I hope this makes great television for you, but remember, when you're editing this footage and deciding how to package my breakdown for maximum impact, that you're not just dealing with content. You're dealing with a real person's life, a real person's pain, and a real person's family. With that, Prince Harry turned and walked toward the exit, his shoulders squared with dignity despite everything that had just transpired. The audience sat in stunned silence, many with tears in their eyes, as they watched him disappear behind the curtain. Jimmy sat alone at his desk, the weight of what had just happened settling over him like a heavy blanket. The studio remained silent for several more seconds before the producers finally called cut, but the damage was already done. In the span of one interview, a late-night talk show had become the site of one of the most explosive celebrity meltdowns in television history. What did you think of this incredible breakdown? Was Jimmy Kimmel completely out of line, or was Prince Harry's reaction over the top? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable celebrity stories that you won't see anywhere else.